Welcome back to the Tundra, episode 3, presented by Nicolay Law. He's John Kuhn, Green Bay Packers legend. There were a lot of comments on the YouTube last week saying, oh, he is a legend. He is a legend, after I questioned if I could call you that. I'm Matt Schneidman from The Athletic. Episode 3, John, Packers are 2-0. Little did we know when we started this podcast a couple weeks ago that the Packers would look like the best team in the NFL. Arguably, we'll get into that through 2 weeks of the season as we record this at 6:38 p.m. Central Time on Sunday night. There are still a couple games to be played, but I want to spin forward what we saw a couple days ago on Thursday and talk about how it matters or doesn't matter in some instances going forward. What I want to start with first, we'll get into a little bit of the Packers-Commanders game. I want to start with how they took away Jayden Daniels' legs. Jayden Daniels was number 2 in the NFL in quarterback rushing yards last year to Lamar Jackson. I counted 9 times watching the film back that he made himself a runner, totaled 14 yards on those plays. 14 yards. Jeff Hafley said last week, you find out a lot about how much your team loves the game of football and loves each other when you hit the pause button on the tape and you see how many guys are around. What did you see in that game from how they defended Jayden Daniels and how it can maybe help them against other mobile quarterbacks they'll face later this season?
Well, before I tell you with what I saw, let me tell you about what I heard. And talking with players and coaches before the game, they told me they weren't going to change their rush pattern whatsoever. And normally when you play a mobile quarterback, you want to rush to the depth of the quarterbacks, meaning the ends, and then close in on the quarterback at the level he's at. And you want your interior guys to continue getting pressure up the middle while not creating lanes. But they didn't really care about that contained type mentality because they felt like Jayden Daniels was good enough to throw the football from the pocket. So they decided we're going to go after him the same way we're going to go after every quarterback. We're going to pin our ears back. We're going to try and disrupt him, get him off his spot, make him feel us either with flashes of color, loopers, and stunts. And when we get home, we're going to touch him every time we get around him. And I counted, I think it was 9 knockdowns or something like that, Matt, with a couple of sacks paired in there. So they definitely got to Jayden Daniels. The biggest surprise to me was when Jayden Daniels did escape from the pocket, their rally around the football. That's really been the ticket for this defense so far, is this total team speed, because Jayden Daniels might have gotten outside the pocket for a yard, and then you saw 2 or 3 or 4 different colors of white because the Packers were wearing their special uniforms, just flying around him, getting to bring him down. You got Edgerrin Cooper, Quay Walker, Nate Hobbs, Carrington Valentine, all those guys rallying to him because they had vision, and really it's the team speed that neutralized Jayden Daniels' legs.
Yeah, I was kind of surprised they utilized a different philosophy than, I know we talked about it last week, than what they used against guys like Jalen Hurts, Anthony Richardson early last season, those mush rushes. And like you talked about, it required guys like Edgerrin Cooper and Quay Walker to have eyes on the quarterback at the second level. Something that Carl Brooks and Rashawn Gary both said after the game was that on film, they noticed that Jayden liked to escape through the B gap a lot. And there were some times where there were openings in the offensive line for him to escape. But in those openings, you saw Quay Walker or Edgerrin Cooper or someone with eyes on him. And guys weren't really missing tackles in space when he did escape. You know, there was one where he escaped through an A-gap and an Agbar, he just shed his guy and tackled him from behind. One of the most impressive ones, there was the sack early in the game where he kind of tries to get out to the right, reverses, and Devontae Wyatt chases him down. Then there's one later in the game where he bounces out to the right, and I think it was probably Micah Parsons. If I just had to guess, Micah Parsons pressuring the quarterback. And Colby Wooden bounces off his block, and he doesn't tackle Jayden Daniels, but he forces Jayden Daniels out to the right. And Javon Bullard is right there. Javon Bullard doesn't tackle him, but he sets an edge and forces him more to the right. And then Edgerrin Cooper is right there. He had just covered from the far hash marks all the way to the other sideline. And guess what? Edgerrin Cooper doesn't tackle him either, but there was no field left. So he just ran out of bounds for a 0-yard gain. So when Matt LaFleur says after the game that DeMarcus Covington has done a really good job getting these guys to play off one another, I know all those guys aren't defensive linemen, but playing off one another, I think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that play right there, where just funneling him to another guy until there's no green grass left to run. And it was really remarkable how the Packers swarmed and rallied to the ball and really made a guy who can take over a game with his legs ineffective in doing so.
Yeah, I saw the exact play you were talking about, and I can remember phrasing it upstairs to the producer at the time. Did you see Edgerrin Cooper on that one? He just ran the entire course of the field to chase down
Hmm.
Jayden Daniels and knock him out of bounds. And they really relied on their scouting report. So the scouting report where the big chunk plays for Jayden Daniels come right up the middle, and he's down the field really quickly. And they were very cognizant of that, maybe not to let him escape there. If he escaped, it was going to be outside. They also read the scouting report that said when Jayden Daniels runs to his right outside the pocket, he's more looking to throw with the football. When he escapes to the left, he's looking to run. If you go back and watch a tape, every time he gets out left, you see a guy from the secondary, the second level, flying in there to collapse on him immediately before he gets past the line of scrimmage. So they had a game plan for him as the runner, but their game plan for him as the passer did not change their pass rushes one bit.
John, you played on a team with a really, really good defense in 2010. Now, I know this is a loaded question since it's 2 games into the season and there's a lot of football left to be played. We don't know what injuries are going to happen, but you've been around this team for the better part of the last decade and a half, maybe more. When is the last time the Packers had a defense this good? And there is some projection required in that answer. You got to project how good this defense will be. If they keep on this current path, when is the last time the Green Bay Packers had a defense this good?
Well, at least 2010, at least, if not even better than 2000. I think the team speed defensively is better than what we had in 2010. I mean, we had guys that were savvy and smart and fast and made plays, but I'm talking total team speed. The way that these guys run all the way up and down the defensive line, the second level, and then in the secondary. And right now, I would say this team is rivaling somewhere the 2010 team to the 97 defense in what they are as a whole. As a whole, I'm struggling to find a weakness, right? Nate Hobbs came back this week. I asked the secondary, what's it mean to have Nate back? They said he brings kind of a dog to that group, to that room. And Xavier McKinney and Evan Williams are playing great already. And now you have a dog on one side. Keyshawn Nixon is proving he's not just, a special teams or a slot guy, a nickel guy that he can cover outside. Keyshawn Nixon had a fantastic football game, a
I wish
fantastic
somebody would have
game.
written a feature about how he became the number one cornerback.
Well, put it this way. Keyshawn Nixon is playing at a level higher than I've ever seen him play right now. And that's great. And I think some of that is due to the team around you, knowing that the defensive line is going to, knowing that time clock in your head, you don't necessarily have to worry about double moves because they might not have time for double moves. But with that said, Keyshawn Nixon, just his pass breakups and being all over the wide receivers all day. So how good is this defense? This defense is fantastic. 2 games, home games, and everybody says, "Well, you had home games." Yeah, but this defense will travel because it's fast. This isn't like they're tricking teams and fooling them into a bunch of turnovers or winning because the team can't hear at Lambeau Field. No, this is team speed, and team speed travels on defense. And quite frankly, man, this will be the slowest field they play on all year. Lambeau Field is the slowest field they're going to play on all season long, except for maybe Chicago. That's a little bit slower. This is the slowest field they play. They're going to look faster when they go on the road. That's what this defense
What do you
is.
mean by slow field? Explain that to the people.
Okay, so Lambeau Field is a slick track. In case people haven't noticed, we complained about Brazil last year and we were pissed off that everybody was slipping and sliding and falling all around. Lambeau Field is probably the slickest track in the NFL. The grass at Chicago, they grow it a little bit longer on purpose and sometimes they water it. So sometimes that's a slower track. But Green Bay is one of the slower tracks in the NFL, if not the slowest. And in fact, offensive linemen for years you'd have fast dome rushers coming. I mean, Dwight Freeney type guys coming to Green Bay. And they wouldn't fear them one bit because they knew when we're at Lambeau Field, they can't just burn around that corner because they'll fall. And this is a slower track for defenses. And because of that, when they go on the road, you're going to see this team flying around as fast or even faster.
I want to touch on a couple more things out of Thursday night's game and kind of spin them forward before we get into some more Jordan Love talk and then Packers Browns preview based on what we saw in that Browns Ravens game today. We who cover the team and are around the team on a daily basis saw the season Tucker Kraft had last year. It was kind of like a mini breakout year. I think he led all tight ends in yards after catch per reception. wasn't a Pro Bowler or an All Pro, but entering his third season, it's a guy you saw and said, okay, this is a guy who could take that next step into the elite tier. And in front of a national audience on Thursday night, 6 catches, tied his career high, 124 yards, career high, and caught his second touchdown in as many weeks. This guy has great hands. He's a good route runner. Probably can work on his blocking a little bit, but it's not like he's an
Wait,
incomplete
did
tight
you say
end.
Tucker Kraft needs to work on his blocking?
I said
We're
he
talking about
probably
the same guy
could.
here.
I don't think he's a complete blocker. I think he would
Oh
agree with
no,
that as
he's a
well.
fantastic blocker, Matt. He's probably top 5% blocking tight ends in the NFL, I would say. I would say right now.
Okay.
I think Tucker Kraft overall right there with George Kittle as the most versatile all-around tight end in the game. I truthfully believe that. I've had discussions with scouts. I've had discussions with other people around football. They believe the same thing. And this is
I'm
probably
not
going to
saying
be
he's a bad blocking tight end. I'm just saying he's probably
no, I know.
better as a receiver than he is as a blocker.
Well, how about this? If he could get better as a blocker, how about the guy first 100-yard receiving game in his life, not his NFL career?
I don't think that's. We fact checked that,
Oh, you
and
did.
he had. I think Jim Polzine from the State Journal fact checked that and found 200-yard receiving games in college.
Okay, well, Tucker Kraft is a Matt Schneidman proclaimed liar because that's what he said. But with all that being said, this guy, I mean, he can grow in so many ways. I
Mm-hmm.
remember before his first game as a starter, Luke Musgrave just went down. It was their rookie season. I think it was like 8 or 9 games in. It was at Detroit, and I talked to Tucker on the field before the game. I said, "How excited are you for this?" And he goes, I can't tell you how jacked up I am. I know what I am on this team. I know
That
what
was
they
week
see me
12.
as.
That was the
They have
Thanksgiving
me
game.
Yeah, they have me dubbed as the blocking tight end. So it's funny. I mean, he was literally the blocking tight end on the team.
Mm-hmm.
All the routes went to Luke Musgrave. He goes, I just cannot wait to show these guys what I can do. And then in that game, he had a big catch with a run. Didn't get to 100 yards, as we know, because this was his first one this last week. But he showed in that game just what he can do with the football. He's nasty with the football in his hands. He's faster than what people think. He's an absolute Mack truck. And the guy has great hands and can block. I mean, he's all around fantastic.
Tucker Kraft said last year that he was never going to let a defensive back tackle him in space on first contact, or maybe it was just in space. We saw that against Commanders safety Will Harris there on the right sideline. He's a weapon after the catch, and he has established himself as a good enough blocker to be able to sell the block on his touchdown catch, because that route doesn't work unless you kind of sell the block. Because if you block, then as Tucker said, the safety comes down. There's nobody guarding you over the top, and then he can just leak out for an easy touchdown. So that's how you kind of have to become a complete package to make plays like that work. But I think my prevailing takeaway from that game, and really from what we've seen over the last year plus from Tucker, is that he can be one of the best tight ends in this league, especially as we see guys like Travis Kelce and George Kittle and Mark Andrews kind of near the back end of their career. The likes of Brock Bowers, Tucker Kraft, Trey McBride, Tyler Warren, who's had a nice first couple games with the Colts, are that next group up, I think.
Oh,
And Tucker Kraft
absolutely.
deserves to be right there with those guys.
Yeah, and I mean, you named a bunch of fine tight ends right there. And when I start talking about all around tight end, all around, the ones that can block from the backfield, that can block from the wing, that can block as the wide tight end in line, you can flex them out. You can run underneath routes. You can run over the top routes. He runs a really nice skinny post down around the end zone for red zone touchdowns. I mean, he's really good at that, and he has great hands. I think all around wise, man, he doesn't have. He's not missing a tool in his toolbox. He has every job covered that the Packers could possibly ask him to do.
And when you have Tucker Kraft, I don't think it matters as much if you don't have a true number one wide receiver. If you have a true number one tight end who puts up numbers like a true number one wide receiver. And that's spinning this forward to say they're going to be without Jayden Reed for a while. Rappaport said 6 to 8 weeks with a broken collarbone. So you think, okay, who is going to step up? And we'll get into that more later. But I want to relate it to this. Jordan Love and Matthew Golden haven't really hit on much yet. Game one, it was for probably a lack of opportunity. Game two, there were 2 opportunities for long
Mm-hmm.
touchdowns. One on the
Mm-hmm.
4th and 3, where Jordan kind of throws it behind him, gives the DB time to catch up. And I want to ask you this about the second one. Did Matthew Golden look up at the ball too soon, or is that on Jordan Love for overthrowing him? I'm not saying it's an easy throw, but that's a lot of yardage and touchdowns out there that those two could maybe connect on with more reps. And I know the Packers won, so it's easy to say, oh, who cares? But at some point, they might need to connect on some of those.
All right, so let me first start with this. He missed the first one because they thought there were 12 men on the field, and it got hurried. It got rushed. Matt LaFleur thought there was 12 men on the field. They were probably setting something up. I'm not quite sure. Like, did they want to run that play for certain, or were they going to try and draw them off sides before kicking a field goal? Or no matter what, they thought there were 12 men on the field. They told Jordan to hut the ball or just go with the play. Jordan went with the play. It looked like the play was rushed and hurried, and Jordan was a little bit below or behind Matthew Golden, and it got the pass broken up. It was the right look, the right read, just a split second late on his delivery. So the second one, you get in the ball game, you're set up, you're ready, you hit your drop, you got your little, you hold the safety with your eyes, and then you fire this ball, and you think, well, there's no way this guy's so fast. There's no way I'm going to overthrow him, and you overthrow him by a little bit. So that is the synchronicity that we've been looking for through training camp, but missed time, remember, with Jordan Love. So now you got a little bit of, we got to figure this thing out on the fly during the season with the rookie speedster wide receiver. They'll get there. They're not quite there yet.
And I dropped my jaw because I didn't know they taught synchronicity at Shippensburg University.
I hope I used that right. That could have that could have been a Kuhnism. That could have been a Kuhnism.
Listen, I got into NYU and the Syracuse Journalism School, and synchronicity even blew me away. So props to you for that. And before we wrap up this first segment here and then get into some more Jordan Love talk, I think the whole Tucker Kraft, Matthew Golden thing ties together because in training camp, we said, okay, Matthew Golden is probably the closest thing to a true number one wide receiver. But if it is going to take him and Jordan Love a little bit of time to click, then they have Tucker Kraft. And I know he's not a wide receiver, but he puts up those numbers. And, I wonder if there's still some, okay, Matthew Golden still needs to learn a little bit more of the offense to get him on the field more, because I'm not going to say far too many times, but occasionally, when I look down on the field, Matthew Golden's standing there on the sideline. And to be a true number one wide receiver, that guy is on the field more. So if they're going to kind of ease him in, and I'm sure that's not going to be possible anymore with Jayden Reed down, they're going to need to start clicking. But in the meantime, it's nice to have a tight end like Tucker Kraft.
Well, let me throw this out there. Do you remember when we had this podcast, but it was by a different name last year, and we went into the season, we said, do we really need a number one wide receiver? And I think you and I unanimously said, well, why do you need a number one when all of your receivers have a different skill set and they all seem very capable of being at minimum a two? Like you can spread the ball around. The defense doesn't know where it's going. You have plenty of different options. Well, guess what? Matthew Golden's not a number one yet. Savion Williams is not a number one yet. Romeo Doubs is playing phenomenal right now. Dontavian Wicks is uncoverable on the out routes right now. Jayden Reed was super slippery for anybody in the slot until he got hurt. And you got Tucker Kraft. I mean, just right now, all the receivers are playing similar to what we thought they were going to play last year before the drops, before the penalties, before all the question marks of, yeah, you really need a true number one comes around. So I don't know if we need to force the number one issue on Matthew Golden, because with a defense like this, with Josh Jacobs toting the football, even at not an efficient clip, but just that continual pounding of the football, and then Jordan Love spreading the ball around. I mean, there's 11 guys that have caught passes already this season.
That's a great segue.
He's
one
been
more
great.
thing to add?
I was just going to say, he's been great at not necessarily feeling like he needs to force it in any which direction, because they're having success spreading it around.
It's a good segue, John Kuhn. After the break, we'll be right back talking about that QB1 of the Packers. Is he a game manager? Is Jordan Love a game manager? Is that a bad thing? You want to listen to that. This episode of the Tundra podcast is brought to you by Nicolay Law. Since 2007, Nicolay Law has been representing injured folks in Wisconsin.
And listen, you could be driving from a tailgate or trying to brave those highways during the snow. Accidents, they still happen. And when they do, you deserve a team that knows your story and your state. At Nicolay Law, they're more than attorneys. They're your neighbors. They're our neighbors, and they fight to get you back on your feet.
So if life takes an unexpected turn, call Nicolay Law at 1-855-NICOLAY or visit nicolaylaw.com. That's 1-855-NICOLET or visit nicolaylaw.com. They're proud to stand up for the Midwest, one case at a time. Welcome back to the Tundra, presented by Nicolay Law. John, we talked a little bit last episode about Jordan Love and that game manager moniker after one game of him maybe not putting up otherworldly numbers, but the Packers still winning convincingly, and whether it was a sustainable way for the Packers to win moving forward. Game 2, his numbers were better. Let me pull them up right here. 19 for 31, 292 yards, 2 touchdowns again. That was 9 more passing attempts, 104 more passing yards. Look, right now, as we record this on Sunday night, Jordan Love leads the NFL in average intended air yards per target with 12.5. In other words, on average, his passes, whether they're completed or not, are traveling 12 and a half yards in the air. To me, game manager says, all right, you're dinking and dunking your way down the field. You're taking what's given to you, and you're letting the run game and the defense do the majority of the work. Now,
that's the negative. That's
right.
The negative game manager
But my point is, game managers aren't thought of as people who really push the ball down the field, which is what Jordan Love does. Technically, more than anybody in the NFL through 2 weeks with a couple teams left to play. A, I want to ask you, what is your view on that term? And B, Jordan Love has left some plays out there, but if he plays as he has the first 2 weeks, and especially if he capitalizes on some of those plays that he hasn't the first 2 games, what role do you think he plays in helping this Packers team go as far as they possibly can?
Okay, now I'm a fullback, so you're going to have to tell me what I'm answering again for number 1, because you just asked me number 2. You asked me 2 questions, and they were both very wordy. So number 1, you want me to say what I think about game manager?
Yeah, we'll go with that one first.
Okay, so to me, every quarterback is a game manager. Every quarterback should be a game manager. Every quarterback's job is to not throw for 1,000,000 yards, not throw for 1,000,000 touchdowns. It's to win the football game. It's to put their team in position to win the football game. If that's calling a run because they have a 2 shell and they have leverage on their techniques to one side, then great. That's what they do. If it's single high and they're coming down in the box because they're running football well, then yeah, it's to take a shot down the field. I think every quarterback, the best quarterbacks, know how to manage the game. But the best quarterbacks aren't just game managers. There are guys that make other people around them better. And I believe Jordan Love's one of those guys. And I think he is, because he's not asking his guys to do anything above and beyond what they're capable of doing. And he's picking and choosing the best spots to go to them. A lot of that has to do with Matt LaFleur and his game plans, because he's been doing a great job with those ever since Jordan Love has taken over. And even when Jordan Love was injured last year, we saw what Malik Willis was able to do in a game management role as well. And I don't have a problem calling quarterbacks game managers, but you can tell by the tone sometimes if it's meant to sound good or not. I think when people say game manager in a negative tone, it's to mean, well, that guy can't make all the throws in the world. And I think Jordan Love can make the majority of throws that are in the playbook.
I think I mentioned this before, but when I did my podcast with LaFleur last year and I sat down with him, it was probably the last quarter of the season. And he said, I think Jordan's playing his best football. And I said, you mean this season, right? And he said, no, of his entire career. And granted, it was only 2 seasons at that point.
Toyota-thon.
Right. He thought he was playing better football, even if he didn't have the gaudy numbers, than he did in that second half of the 2023 season. So keep in mind that our view from the outside, and when I say our, I mean the people who didn't grow up in the game and didn't play for the Packers, because John, I don't include you in that our group. Our view of Jordan's play is probably different than Matt LaFleur's view. I can't sit here and say that Jordan Love, at least by my definition of game manager, is or the general public's definition of game manager is a game manager because of how many great throws he makes. The touchdown to Jayden Reed that didn't count because of Belton's hold. The throw to Malik Heath Those aren't game manager throws. Now,
No, those are unbelievable dimes.
and then that's not even considering the ones that he didn't hit on, the two to Golden that we just talked about. So, yes, the Packers running game was probably a bigger strength than the passing game last season. They ran the ball, as everyone knows, more than they had in the 5 prior seasons under Matt LaFleur. The defense was really good. They took the ball away a lot. And it was kind of the offense being a benefactor of the defense taking the ball away so much. Through 2 games this year, the defense has been the strong suit. The running game hasn't really got going. The passing game has kind of been a complementary facet to the defense. So automatically you think, okay, Jordan Love's just a game manager since he's not carrying the team on his right arm. But I think the important thing to acknowledge and realize is that he's still doing his part and then some. And there are going to be times this season when they do need the team to
So
carry, or they do need him to carry the team, excuse me. And I think he's still very capable of that, as I said
what
last week.
what I think's interesting is you're talking about carrying a team. You mean carrying a team because the other team's scoring points too, and you got to continue to move the football. If you look at their most productive offense in this short season already, it's been when he's throwing the ball.
Mm-hmm.
When they scored points in the first half against Detroit, they were throwing the ball. When they were explosive scoring points on their first couple drives in this last week, it's when they were throwing the ball. And he's been spectacular at it. Now, in the second half, there's been both games a little bit of a woe, but then they get the run game going because they're starting to hammer away on that side as well. And he doesn't have any stat padding. He doesn't care if he throws for 150 or if he throws to 300 yards if they win the football game. And he can still make all those throws. There will be a time he'll need to carry this team, and I believe Jordan Love can carry them through that time that he has to. Of course, for that time to come, the defense is going to have to let up a little bit because they have just been killing offenses right now. By the way, did you see what Detroit did? Yeah, their offense is just fine.
Yeah, that made the Packers defense look even better. Or maybe the Bears just stink. I think Jordan Love has also done his part in giving the defense a 2-score lead to play with the last couple games. And you can even look at it from the flip side of, okay, Jordan Love's a benefactor of the defense, or you could look at it as the defense is a benefactor of Jordan Love because they've really been able to pin their ears back and get after the quarterback with a 2-score lead that Jordan Love gave them. So
Yeah, the one thing that'll be interesting is when they hit a complete team, right? A team that can play physical defense, that can possess the football, and that can score points quickly, right? There's only a couple of those. I'm talking about the Bills, the Ravens, the Eagles, right? Maybe the Lions at home. If the Packers find themselves in a track meet where they got to score a lot of points and they got to score a lot of points fast because another team just has the number of the defense that day, will they be able to do that for 60 minutes? That's the one question, and it's probably going to be a road game in which this takes place.
I'm looking at the live NFL MVP odds from Potawatomi Sportsbook. The favorite, Josh Allen at plus 325. Second, Lamar Jackson plus 400. Third, Jordan Love, 8-1. So good teams go because of their quarterback. Would you say Jordan Love has been the most important player for the Packers so far this season? I probably wouldn't. I would probably say it's Micah Parsons, but the MVP is a quarterback award. So if the Packers end the season as the best team in the NFL and go 15-2 or something, and Jordan Love keeps this up, then he's going to be in the MVP conversation. I know I said last episode, if he puts up similar numbers to week 1, he's not going to be. Well, his week 2 numbers, he threw for almost 300 yards and just as many touchdowns. And sure, his numbers may not be as gaudy, but if the Packers are alone at the top of the NFL and Jordan Love is this efficient, then he's going to be in the conversation. As long as he puts up numbers probably more similar to week 2 than less than 200 yards. It's picking, hairs here, but I'm just talking about how the outside will view it rather than, because to the Packers, none of this crap matters. To the Packers, it's, people are debating how much our quarterback should do, with how much our defense should do, with how much our running game should do. That's complementary football. When you have 3 arms of the team that can carry you at any moment. That's what the Packers love. This is just fodder for us to talk about on a stupid podcast.
Yeah, and I love the fodder because this team is so complete. This team has so much going for it. There's one spot with a little concern as we talk today on the second Sunday of the NFL season. That's the offensive line, and a lot of that has to do with health and availability. But aside from that, this team is every bit as good on defense as the best defense in the NFL right now. Jordan Love is every bit as efficient as the more efficient quarterbacks in the NFL right now. And his numbers aren't as good or as gaudy as you said Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or one of those guys.
Russell
But
Wilson.
guy but it doesn't have to be. But it doesn't have to be.
Mm-hmm.
You look at those other guys, the reason they're going to win MVP, Lamar Jackson or Josh Allen, the reason it'll be one of those two is because the majority of their win comes on their shoulders, right? Jordan Love's the only thing that's going to take him out of that conversation is the luxury of his teammates and how good they
Exactly.
all are. And that'll pull from him because that's what the fodder will be. But I think the Packers have their sights set on bigger things. I know Jordan Love has his sights set on bigger things. And if he gets the Toyota thon and flips the switch like he has done his first 2 years, and he doesn't have any like bad stretch in between now and then, if he just plays efficient until he gets then you never know. End of the season is when these awards are won.
Quote from Micah Parsons that I think is relevant to this discussion from Thursday night. He said, defense wins championships. Jay Love, I think you give us 20 points, we should be able to win that game. It's all about getting stops and getting the ball back to the offense. As y'all seen against Baltimore and Buffalo, you can have your quarterback damn near have a perfect game but still lose because guess what? The defense gave up what? 40 points? So to your point, John, the reason those guys, Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, are probably going to have more gaudy numbers, and this wasn't the case today since the Bills held the Jets to 10, the Ravens held the Browns to 17. We'll get into that game more in the next segment because the Packers obviously play the Browns. But at least in the first 2 weeks, those defenses don't look nearly as good, at least from week one, as the Packers do. So, like you said, I think maybe the main thing holding Jordan Love back, if this all continues, again, plenty of football left. It's only 2 games. But if these trends continue, the main thing holding Jordan Love back from being in that MVP conversation is his own team. And that's a problem
Well,
he and the Packers will take any day of the week.
but let's also take it with a grain of salt. That Jayden Reed touchdown was a touchdown, if not for a hold. Right? There was a holding call there. There was another penalty or two later in the game that thought to stop the drive. Right? So you got a couple instances there where, heck, he could have been 350 yards and 3 touchdowns. He could have been 350 yards and 4 touchdowns in this football game. Had a couple calls or penalties not have occurred, it could have been one of those, wow, that's a gaudy number game.
All right. Everyone who is watching this by now saw that the Browns said they are going to start Joe Flacco against the Packers. After the break, we're going to dive into what we saw from the Browns today and a couple things to watch in a game that on paper should be a blowout. But will it be? Stay with us right after the break. Welcome back to the Tundra. This segment is brought to you by Potawatomi Sportsbook. Folks, it's football season. We all know how much you love betting on it, almost as much as we love watching it. And there's one sportsbook that's become the best in the Midwest. That's Potawatomi Sportsbook. It's the home of big wins, bold flavors, a bump in atmosphere, a big you-know-what screen, and more. Catch a game at the bar or reserve your spot in the middle of all the action for big events. In fact, you can bet on any sport, anytime. Bet above the rest at Potawatomi Sportsbook. All right, John, I don't think the
They
lines
also
are
have
out.
a really good platter down there, Matt, called the
good
fullback platter. It's called the fullback platter.
Did they name it after you?
Potentially. That is neither here nor there. But
Okay.
go get yourself the fullback platter. It costs exactly $30. You can't finish it, and you'll be taking some home.
You can't. What's on this platter?
Oh man, just you got Philly cheesecakes or a Philly cheesesteak slider. It'd be funny if it was a cheesecake slider, but it's a cheesesteak slider. Then you got chicken wings. Then you got fried cheese curds. Then you have fried mushrooms. I think it's portobello mushrooms, and then something else that's fried because it's a Midwest sampler platter. Everything's fried.
Fair enough. You might need some Tums after that, but it's worth it. All right, let's get into this Packers-Browns matchup. Right now at Pato, Packers are -8. To me, that's a little low. I think the Packers are going to win this game by double digits, but what we saw from the Browns today, I don't think they're as bad as their 0-2 record signifies. Let me read off a couple numbers. The final score was 41-17. So you think, oh, that's a blowout. Kevin Stefanski, Browns head coach, said after the game, we gave them 21 points on a block punt, a fumble recovery, and an interception. The Ravens were 3 of 12 on third down. The Browns outgained the Ravens in total net offensive yards by 80, 322 to 242. The Ravens were held to 21 carries and 2.1 yards per carry. Derrick Henry was a non-factor in this game. They had less than 200 passing yards, and the Ravens only had 2 sacks against an immobile quarterback, with all due respect to the Super Bowl champion Joe Flacco. So I don't think the Browns are as bad as that score indicates. Specifically, their defense. Their defense was just put in some bad positions by their offense and their special teams. So maybe -8 is a good number. I don't think this is a trap game for the Packers, but I also don't think the Browns are the worst team in the NFL, is as kindly as I can put it.
Yeah, they're probably not the worst team in the NFL. That would be hard to say. I'd have to really watch all their games super seriously and compare them to other teams to be able to make that projection. But I do think this is an offense, the Browns I'm speaking of, that the Packers defense can just go wild on. They can just go absolutely wild on them. You get 2 games, you get this one away. There's a little challenge being away. You're going to get a little extra wrinkles, some more motion, some more shifts, some more adjustments you're going to have to go with there. But this is an offense that our defense should absolutely contain, absolutely limit, and be able to feast on the quarterback. They should be able to get home to Joe Flacco in this offense. And they had 4 sacks in each of the first 2 games. I think that's a fine number to set it as an over and under for how many sacks they're going to get in this third game. And I think defensively, our guys are going to be licking their chops this week. Offensively, you said it right there to start with. The Browns defense did not play terrible in this 41-17 loss that they had against the Ravens. This Browns defense did not play terrible when they played Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and T. Higgins in week 1. This defense has actually played pretty decent. I'd say the defense itself is giving up more like 15, 20, 23 points a game, when in fact their average is going to look worse than that. So don't let the score fool you. Just like the Packers, I feel like the Packers have had more dominant wins in these first 2 weeks than 14 and 9 points. Don't let the full score fool you in this Browns team, because I think their defense is much more capable of putting up a stingy fight and making it difficult for the offense to put points up.
Well, if you just look at last week, they held the Bengals to 17 points. Some consider that one of the most explosive offenses in the league, and Joe Burrow was healthy that whole game. The Bengals eked out a 17-16 win. So this Browns defense is no joke. It obviously starts and ends with Myles Garrett, and that's the matchup I want to get into. So Myles Garrett potentially against Anthony Belton. We talked about Connerly from the Commanders, the rookie right tackle, against Micah Parsons. That was a mismatch. He stood no chance. Now, if Myles Garrett is going up against Anthony Belton, and Anthony Belton played 51 snaps to Darian Kinnard's 17 against the Commanders. So the Packers clearly think he's a better right tackle. They started off rotating. Belton got the start. Kinnard, the 4th-year veteran, came in, and then Belton, got the majority of the work in the second half. Belton, per PFF, 0 pressures allowed and 1 penalty in 28 pass blocking snaps. That 1 penalty, obviously the hold that negated the Jayden Reed touchdown catch. Darian Kinnard, 1 pressure allowed, no penalties on only 9 pass blocking snaps. PFF did not grade Belton kindly as a run blocker. They graded Kinnard much better as a run blocker in whatever it was, 8 run blocking snaps, I think it was. So Packers have a decision to make. I mean, they can obviously move Myles Garrett around, the Browns can, but I would think to take advantage of the more favorable matchup, like the Packers do with Micah Parsons in moving him around, they'll probably, especially if they start Anthony Belton, say, all right, Rook, here's a guy in Micah Parsons' echelon. Let's see if you can block him. And just like other teams have to Micah Parsons, the Packers are going to have to devote more attention to that. They're going to have to double him and chip him. And Tucker Kraft's probably going to be late getting out on some of his routes because he has to chip or thump Myles Garrett on that side. Or maybe they leave that to Luke Musgrave or John Fitzpatrick. But Myles Garrett, you cannot allow him to wreck this game. And just as much as Micah Parsons is an advantage for the Packers defense, Myles Garrett is for the Browns defense.
Yeah, and I think they have two really solid corners in Cleveland, and Ward and Newsom. I think both of those guys are pretty top end cornerbacks in the NFL. So not just are you going to have Micah Parsons breathing down your neck, you might not have a lot of space for the wide receivers out there if these guys stay on their hip pocket. So their defense kind of goes hand in hand the way that our defense does. They do loops, they do twists, they do stunts. You saw Joe Burrow take one of the more vicious hits in the NFL week 1 against Myles Garrett. So it's a defense that can make our day tough. They can definitely make our day difficult. I would assume that Matt LaFleur is going to have a game plan for Myles Garrett. I agree with you. I think it's going to have a lot of attention built over there. And it doesn't sound like this oblique injury is something that's going to recover very quickly for Zach Tom. So I would expect, again, Belton to go out there and probably get the king's share. And Belton's a guy that he's really, really big. But as the game wears on, his technique starts to get a little bit sloppy, and that's something he's got to clean up as a pro.
Yeah, I think the Packers win this game regardless, but I think how Anthony Belton holds up in not letting Myles Garrett wreck this game, if they do match up quite a few times, I think will determine whether it's a blowout or a close game. What are we thinking for score predictions? And let's base it off the -8 spread that Pato has set. That can obviously change throughout the week, but the early line is -8 Green Bay in Cleveland for a noon game next week.
Yeah, at some point in time, the offense is going to shake off a little bit of its, inconsistencies. They're a little bit of a roller coaster type ride, the Packers, that is, this year. And one of these games, they're going to play a complete game. Do they need a complete game in this one? I don't think they do. So I like something like, I'm going to say 20. Can they score 27 3 games in a row?
Sounds
I think
like you want to predict that.
I do want to predict that. What would the odds of that have been had we go to Napato at the beginning of the season? I'm going to go Packers 27. Let's do the same thing as Lions. 13 for the Browns.
I'm going to go Packers 28-17. I think they cover the -8. I think they're able to get the running game going a little more. Josh Jacobs said recently that it normally takes 3-4 weeks for the running game to get going, to get those offensive linemen really firing off the ball. So he wasn't concerned after week 1 that the running game took a little while to get going. I think this is the game that it gets going. I think Jacobs finds the end zone for an 11th consecutive game. So if you want to bet on that, go right ahead. Your odds probably aren't great because he scores every single game, but I think Josh Jacobs finds the end zone again. And I think this is the 3rd consecutive game where the other team scores a garbage time touchdown to make the score look closer than it is. I think it's 28-10 with like 3 minutes left. And, Dylan Gabriel comes in just like he did today and throws a garbage time touchdown to make it 28-17. But I think the Packers go to 3-0. And what I want to ask you now, John, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but that's exactly what we're going to do. When is the next game?
Yes. The answer is yes.
It's not a yes or no question. When is the
next game?
Game?
Sunday. It's
no,
1 week from
when
today.
is the next game that you could say, okay, this is a toss-up, or I could realistically see the Packers losing this game? They have the Browns. They have the Dallas Cowboys, who had an absolute classic with the Giants today, won 40-37 on the last kick of overtime. Then they have the bye week. Then they have the Bengals, potentially without Joe Burrow, who reportedly tore ligaments in his toe and has turf toe. That's in 4 weeks. If he has to go on IR, he's missing the Packers game. Then they have the Cardinals, who are 2-0, but they played the Saints and the Panthers. Then they have the Steelers, who look terrible today against the Seahawks. Could the Packers, realistically, now it's the NFL, you're always going to get tripped up by something that you don't expect to be. But would you be surprised if the Packers start the season 7-0?
No, not surprised in the least. And you said, what's the one game that could get tripped up? The Arizona game out in Arizona could potentially be a difficult one for them. We'll see how Arizona continues to develop as the weeks get closer. The biggest thing, the biggest thing that can hurt the Packers right now, I agree with you. They're probably going to lose a game this year. And I think when they lose, we'll look back and say, the other team didn't beat them. The Packers just lost. The Packers lost that game. right? On their schedule, who am I looking at as a team? I put the Packers, and this is not hyperbole. I believe this to be true because I think this defense is that damn good. And I think Jordan Love and his weapons are going to continue to get better and progress. I put the Packers right there with the Eagles, with the Ravens, and with the Bills as solidly the top four teams in the NFL. Top four teams in the NFL. You got to be playing your best football at the right time. But right now, through 2 weeks, it's those four teams. I don't even think it's close.
Can I ask you one thing before we get out of here? So let's say the Packers, I'm really getting too far ahead of myself now. I'm looking at the 2011 Green Bay Packers game by game. You guys were 13-0. Was that loss against the Kansas City Chiefs good for you? Do you think the pressure of going undefeated, now, obviously it didn't matter because you guys lost to the Giants in the first round of the playoffs, second round of the playoffs, technically. But when I say good for you, what I mean is if the Packers were to be 10-0 or whatever, and they get to the playoffs, is there something to having a loss to maybe take the pressure off of an undefeated season? And would that hang over their head in the playoffs? I'm getting way too far ahead of myself. So it's just a thought that popped into my head.
No, I'd have rather we won that game so that teams didn't use that as a blueprint going forward the rest of the season. They took that and they said, "Heck, we're gonna play man underneath with a 2-shell over top. And we're gonna have a backer mug Kuhn on third down so that they stay in and adjust protection calls, and then we're gonna get one-on-ones on this side." And they had a pretty good game plan in that football game. I would have loved to have gone undefeated in that season, even with the loss in the playoffs, because then that would have been at least cool to win 16 straight games in a regular season. But no, I don't think. I mean, you can look at losses and you can make it worthwhile, but I don't think it did any benefit or did any hurt, or if it did anything, it did hurt for our team in that football season.
It didn't do hurt for me because I grew up a diehard New York Giants fan, and I remember that game. And as you all know, I'm no longer a fan. I'm a neutral reporter, but that game brought a lot of pleasure to. How old was I? I was born in 1995, so I was 15 years old when that happened. It was great. So I'm glad the Giants had a nice game plan that game. With all due respect, of course. All right, I'm going to end this before John gets angry at me. We appreciate everybody for listening to The Tundra. Follow us at The Tundra GB on Twitter. Subscribe and like all of our videos on YouTube, on Instagram at The Tundra GB. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to shout out Adam Gracia, our fantastic producer who makes the whole show run, makes us all look good every week. We'll see you next time.